Hello, readers, and welcome back to Quarantine Literacy. We are continuing this week with our author study of Andrea Beatty, an amazing author who's done a bunch of really fun and beautiful, inspiring kids' books. Today, we're going to read Rosie Revere, Engineer. So you'll notice that her titles are all similar, right? We had Iggy Peck, which was the full name of the character yesterday, Iggy Peck, Architect, and now we have Rosie Revere, Engineer. So her titles are the names of her main character and then sort of the job that they want to have when they're older, or the thing that they aspire to be. So this is by Andrea Beatty and it's illustrated by David Roberts. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. Now, remember yesterday I told you to watch out for recurring characters. So Lila Greer, the teacher, is the same teacher who was in Iggy Peck, Architect. And you'll notice if you scan the faces of the students in the classroom that Iggy Peck is in this class. So you're going to find that all the characters in her books all come from this classroom, this second grade classroom. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. You can see she's got all this stuff, and she's building and creating from what other people thought was just trash. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. The uncle she loved most was Zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head, from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. Look at this crazy invention. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud. But Fred slapped his knee and chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. So embarrassed, perplexed is like confused, and dismayed is like sad and confused. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. I love it, Fred hooted. Oh, truly I do. But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day, kept her dreams to herself. So Zookeeper Fred was laughing at her invention, and Rosie thought that was an indication that he didn't like it, or that he thought it was silly and not very good. But I think he was just laughing at it because he thought it was kind of amazing and funny. But either way, the effect that it had on Rosie was to make her feel shy about her inventions and to not want to share it with the world anymore. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie of tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list, one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams. So she wants to fly. That's her final wish, is to fly. That night, as Rosie lay wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky. Some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. So she is feeling more bold and more ready to get back into her engineering status and maybe actually make a new creation. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test, just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. So it worked for a minute, and then it crashed down. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. Uh-oh. This is just like when her uncle was slapping his knee and laughing, and she thought it meant that she should be embarrassed and that she shouldn't try again. So let's see what's going to happen now. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, "Oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer." And there's her great Aunt Rose laughing. And now Rosie Revere is feeling so sad. She's feeling like she can't do it. She turned round to leave, but then great-great-aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. "You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try! This great flop is over. It's time for the next." Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. "I failed," said dear Rosie. "It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed." "Yes," said her great aunt. "It crashed, that is true. But first, it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew." So Rosie was thinking that it was a great flop and it was a big mistake. But her great-great-aunt is saying that actually it worked for a moment and then it failed, but that's okay because great engineers, they build their first creation and then they revisit it and revise it and make it better. "Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next." She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear, to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as loudly as Rosie Revere. So I think the big takeaway here is that engineers, like many scientists and like many of us just in the world, have to remember that we learn from our mistakes. that is the best way to grow, is to make a mistake and learn and make changes based on what didn't work. And that's a huge part of being an engineer, right? You build something, you test it out, and then you go back to the drawing board and you make a bunch of changes so that it actually works, right? And I love that Rosie figures out that lesson in the book, that it doesn't have to be perfect the first time, and failing doesn't mean that you're not a success. It just means that you have to try again and you can't quit, right? She said that's the true failure, is if you quit. So since this is an author study, I started making a list of some of the things I was noticing. Now that we've read 2 books by Andrea Beaty, I started making a list of some of the things I'm noticing about her as an author. So I just wrote at the top that our author is Andrea Beaty, and I'm starting to just write down some of the character traits that I notice in our main characters in these books. And then some of the themes or the lessons that we learn in her books. And then I'm just sort of paying attention to her style, her writing style, and writing down some noticings there. So after reading 2 books, I've come up with these character traits for Iggy Peck and Rosie Revere. They're both pretty bold and brave, right? They're both very creative and inventive. They're driven and motivated. They're independent. They're not doing what everyone else is doing, what every other kid is doing. And they really think outside the box, especially Rosie with all of her amazing creations. And then some themes or lessons that I'm noticing in these 2 books, and I'm wondering if we're going to keep noticing as we continue reading Andrea Beaty's work, is to be yourself, to not give up. That was a big one in Rosie Revere, but it also was sort of a theme in Iggy Peck too, right? And to march to the beat of their own drum. Do you know what that means? That means that when everyone else is doing something different and you want to do your own thing, that's okay. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing. And then some style of her writing that I've noticed is that her books rhyme. They have nice rhythm to them. There's fun characters, great illustrations, and there's empowered and smart kids. So those are just some things that I've noticed so far about our author and her books. And we'll continue to look at Andrea Beaty's work and see if these themes or character traits or these styles hold up. And then we'll add more as we continue to read. Okay, readers, I can't wait to read our next book tomorrow. Until then, bye.